Hello and welcome back to the Brilliant Minds Bunker. I am delighted to be joined today by a gentleman who has achieved literal heights. Chances are you won't have captained an Airbus 380 or played rugby in a Grand Slam winning England team and toured twice with the British and Irish Lions, but my guest today has done both. Not simultaneously, I hasten to add, and as a result has a unique perspective on leadership and life. Welcome, Tony Underwood.
Oh my goodness, thank you very much, Alice. Lovely. Thanks for that.
You're very welcome. Now, Tony, let me start by asking you about your family and your background and upbringing. It's a very interesting story, and you've got so many siblings, haven't you?
I do, lots, not just the famous Rory, but yes, I've got a sister, Wendy, she lives in Melbourne. I've got a brother, Gary, lives in the Philippines, hugely talented in their own right, but didn't go on to play rugby for England and the rest. But yeah, and grew up in Malaysia, hence the sort of the tan that I'm allowed to get away with most of the time, although don't get a lot of the sun too much nowadays. But so yeah, it's a mixed background. Mum was Chinese Malaysian and father English. Met my mum over in Malaysia. Roy was born in the UK, but I was actually born in Malaysia along with my other two siblings. Grew up there till about only around 6 or 7 years old, and then boarding school for me in the north of England for a year or so, and then a few years later introduction to a funny oval shaped thing. So
now I understand your mum was a bit of a star on the old 100-meter sprint at school. Is that where your sporting prowess comes from?
Oh, I think in some ways that I like to say they both had a reason, and I did definitely have an input. Father passed away a long time ago, unfortunately, but he was a footballer by trade. But yeah, mum and my rest of my uncles and aunts on that side of the family are very much quite an athletic sort of prowess. And yeah, mum was the sort of victor in most of her school 100-meter parents races, so she takes glory in that.
Now, did she run with her shoes on?
Oh no, over there it was always barefoot.
No.
But
yeah, absolutely, fantastic. Now, your rugby career spanned both the amateur and professional eras. So, what would you say are the worst and best parts of that, or those two eras?
Well, yeah, I would say the best part of it is, yeah, obviously having the chance to sort of benefit from the best of both parts of those environments. The worst bits, I guess, were, yeah, you'd love doing anything you love is a great thing, and playing rugby is what you love to do, and to do it to the best of your ability would require as much time as you can devote to it. Obviously, playing in the amateur days, we did have understanding employers, most of us, but nothing like the extent of the development in sport that the players are able to do now. So to look at that from the outside and seeing whether it's the facilities, the time given to, or the advice given in certain areas to really bring themselves on and in their development to, achieve excellence, which is what we're all after, but to have that time to do so is, yeah, something I would have loved to have had. But to being able to do it for a little while was great. But at the same time, yeah, the amateur ethos, yeah, I guess there was an element of what an interesting spread of people you got to meet and play with, and the public used to be introduced to. I mean, I was a lowly stockbroker trainee at the time, but you had policemen, RAF pilots, you had lawyers, you had bricklayers, bus drivers, you name it, they were there. And I think that spread of people just brought a really, a different mix to the people that you could not just play with, but cheer on as well.
Now, you mentioned RAF pilot there, but you've actually been a commercial pilot for 20 years. So if I was to ask you what kind of captain you are, can you describe to me that?
What kind of, you've have to ask my first officers and cabin crew, but I'd like to think it's a role you develop into. I've been if you like, a follower under captains of rugby or captains in an aeroplane, and you just watch them, and you're always advised to just take on board what you like about their characters and what you would want to portray when you were to become a leader. And I think that's what I've tried to do, but imprint that upon who I am, try and be very integral to my personality and be true to it in how I like to lead. So I can't say this is the perfect captain, but it's the perfect captain that I can be. It is just to be someone who's, I guess a humble leader is I think some people term it. And it's just someone who just, it is do as I do, not just as I say, because I want to exemplify the characteristics that I have in me, spread that in amongst them. I know what it takes to be a good follower. So I like to give people an environment for them to be as good a follower as they can be as well.
Now, as I understand it, you captain a different crew every time you fly.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in this. How do you build or instill trust in a team when you have to start from scratch each time you fly?
Yeah, a huge frustration, and it is, but at the same time, an opportunity in some ways if you can just sort of turn it around that way. It's difficult, and I think the only way you can do it is be hugely consistent. As I said, be true to yourself, and every single minute act or behavior or comment or anything will be read by the people that you're leading. And because you have such a small amount of time with them, and they're all strangers, you know, sometimes you'd fly with the same person once or twice, but ultimately a bunch of strangers. They've got preconceived ideas about other captains they've flown under, other leaders, the old title about being the god pilot and captain and all that sort of thing. You've got to crush all that and get through to them and very quickly, that sort of behavior. So it's a huge skill to have, and I think something I'm proud that I was able to do most of the time. But as you said, the frustrating thing is you'd have a few days with this group, feel you've got them going in the same wavelength as you'd like them. They go away again, and a few days later, you've got another bunch to sort of instill that. But for me, it's consistency of communication. That it can only be that.
And does that start sort of when you're in the cockpit, or does that happen before? How much time do you get together?
Not a lot of time. So it even starts before. We've got a meeting room that we go through various channels of security, etc. And all of those you get seen. They have an idea of who their captain is going to be. You're visible. So your behavior, as I said, that consistency of behavior has to start before you even think you're meeting them for the first time, because they'll have clocked you. So there's an element of just your behavior as coming to the crew room. When you get to the crew room, we have literally 3 to 5 minutes with them to give a general briefing to the whole lot. You take your bus to the aeroplane, you're on the bus with them, you see them off to the aeroplane. I would make a point of walking around the aeroplane. It's a big thing that we're on, just to get a chance to sort of at least see face to face the crew, wish them a good day, you know, show a bit of humanity to them, because I'm about to go and sit myself in that flight deck. You know what it's like nowadays in an aeroplane. It gets shut due to security reasons. And sometimes it's a big crew, sometimes 28, 30 of them. I might not even see them face to face if I didn't do that sort of first tour, if you like, even going to San Francisco and back.
So I'm just interested because obviously you came from a high performance sports arena. Are there any similarities between sort of high performance sports arena and the aviation arena?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, we touched on a few of them in terms of your leadership style and people followers, etc., and how you sort of generate that. It's all about human performance after all, and we're all striving for excellence. And obviously, most passengers would like to hear that. You know, we are striving to give us an excellent performance that we can do on an aeroplane, just as we do on a rugby pitch. So whether you're sitting on an aeroplane, going on a short journey or a long journey, or whether you're sitting in front of someone at Twickenham, you know, you're looking for the same thing from the people you're watching, performing for you, if you like. The best way I'd like to give an analogy to that is, you want to be talking about a good, excellent performance of a rugby player years later, but you don't necessarily want to be talking about a performance of your pilot and captain, years later. We want to be quite anonymous, getting on with our job anonymously, and not obviously, because the risk profile is the big thing. That's the big difference. You can't push an aeroplane to the limits like you would, like you do try to do in a team and as an individual when you're playing rugby. And so you can't cut corners. The big thing is we want to save time, because it's great for the passengers to arrive early. It's good to not burn so much fuel, etc. But cutting corners can lead you down dark alleys and traps and expose yourself to a higher risk profile. So I think that's the main difference.
Now, you sort of strike me as a relatively calm individual. Is that something you've had to work at in terms of being a captain of a plane, or is that something that comes naturally to you?
I think it's pretty natural to me. I don't know whether it's being a third brother. You're quite young. You sort of get sort of kowtowed down. You mentioned my background. I think it's that Asian background to a certain extent. You keep yourself low. You don't necessarily be seen, not heard. That sort of comment that you might have heard of, and very much that was how we were. You respect your elders. You get on with things, and you just take what's given down to you, and you pick up the scraps that you can and just be happy with them. And I guess that's how I've carried my life through. Generally optimistic that things are going to happen for me, and I think that's stood me in very good stead. And So yeah, just that, I suppose that calmness comes through because of that. I don't have huge expectations, and just a big thing about under promise and over delivering, I think, is a good way. And I think if you do that, things tend to stay quite calm.
Now, deadly viruses and travel are clearly not compatible, as we know. So how is COVID changing the aviation industry? I mean, from your perspective?
Oh, hugely. I mean, I haven't flown an aeroplane for about 10 months now. Pilots are staying current by just going in simulators, etc. Some are able to still fly if they're doing the right kind of flying, a lot of cargo freight flying, obviously flying, whether it's the vaccines, PPE equipment, that kind of stuff around, as well as trade. But so lots of airplanes grounded, lots of people just sat on the ground, trying to sort of fill in the time in between. Unfortunately, some people have been laid off as well. And so it's an adjustment, a massive adjustment that they're having to, and lots of uncertainty. I think a lot of people can share that, whether you're in the travel or aviation industry or not of it. We're living through hugely uncertain times. People are paying ultimate sacrifices, and people are paying sacrifices of their jobs as well. And it's a difficult time for every one of them.
You talk about uncertainty and adaptation, and I know you had a sort of string of injuries at the end of your career in rugby, and clearly you adapted and became a commercial pilot. What kind of tips or things that you can share with people who might be going through a change of circumstances? How do you adapt? How do you reinvent yourself?
Yeah, I think the thing about reinvention to me is, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're sort of looking at, you have an identity and you're doing that job by the label you're given because you are a rugby player, or you're a pilot, whatever it is you're doing. And the difficulty with that is actually when you're just identifying yourself with that label, that's where you have a problem, because you have to reinvent yourself. If you don't spend your time doing that, or try not to do that, you'll probably find this sort of procedure quite a bit easier, if you like. Depends what you like to do as a rugby player. I don't know if it was the glory and the fame, etc., that came with what you like to do. If it was the having the 4 bars on your shirt that identified you as a person and you lived that way, of course it's going to be very hard if that's taken away from you. However, if you fundamentally get down to what it is that drives you to, that gave you the purpose to be a rugby player, and what you enjoyed and what you really got out of it, same with being a pilot, I think that is what you can take forward. You can't take the label. You're always going to be an ex-rugby player. Those of you out the job, they're always going to be an ex-pilot. But you can move on if you don't assign yourself with that label, and really assign yourself with the, if you like, the character, the fundamental things that drove you to do those things.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that. So it's not the number on your shirt or the stripes on your shoulder. It's the person inside. That's the person that you are, whether you're in a profession that's a professional sport, or whether you're in aviation or whatever. That's the person. That's the thing that gets taken forward to the next role, whatever that might be. That's really interesting. I can't believe it, Tony, but we're running out of time. I can't believe it's just whizzed by. Thank you so much for chatting to me today. So many interesting insights, and thank you for sharing those. And I look forward to hearing from you again and finding out what you're up to. You obviously live in a beautiful place. I've been admiring those wonderfully high ceilings. So obviously a barn conversion of some description.
Yeah, I could say it's a virtual background, but yeah, I'm very fortunate. Actually, it's a real one. Zoom hasn't transported me somewhere. I have actually have the opportunity to live in a very nice spot, which, makes the last few months a lot more easier to sort of contend with. But yeah, thank you very much. It's a wonderful place to be.
Well, thank you. And thank you for keeping your dogs out, because albeit we would like to have seen them, I think they might have been a bit disruptive. But thank you very much, Tony, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Alice. Take care.